Good afternoon, friends. I would like to welcome you today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker. It's the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, well, friend, the answer is always going to be comic books. I grab a fistful of comic books from my immediate surroundings, and we flip through them here on the screen for your pleasure, entertainment, edification, however you want to put it. All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to point you in the direction of the Patreon. If you like these videos, if you like any of the videos that I put up on this channel, if you like any of the writing I do, that's where you need to show your appreciation. I got tons of stuff there for download right there, right now as we speak. I'm also putting up videos about new comic books. They're called Hey Tegan, What's in the Bag? More or less every week. I come home from the comic book store and we look through my purchases because, say it with me folks, I spend too much money on comic books. Alright, so let's kick things off with a damn fine comic book. Doom 2099, number 9. Now, of all the original 2099 books, I think, oddly enough, Doom 2099 gets a bit of the short stick in hindsight. Not because it was a bad comic. Quite the opposite. Doom 2099 was, from the very first issue, actually a pretty decent comic book, occasionally great. The problem was the first creative team, which was artist Pat Broderick and John Francis Moore writing, they were succeeded after the 25th issue by Warren Ellis, and that run ended up being quite big, quite influential, reshaped the line for the remainder of the line's existence. So the first run, the first 25 issues of Doom 2099, before the creative switchover, like I say, they've been overshadowed because they weren't completely throwing everything that had come before it into relief. They were just trying to be very good near-future sci-fi with a cyberpunk edge, with Doom as the hero in a world that was messed up enough to allow Dr. Doom to play the hero role. And that's, I think, one reason why this was as popular a book as it was, because it was Dr. Doom being written really well, but in a set of circumstances, in an environment where essentially the exact same character, more or less, as the Doom that we knew, maybe just a tiny bit calmed down. Like he's drinking decaf, but he's still substantially the same person, just in a completely different set of circumstances. So he ends up coming out with a much more heroic cast to his actions, because he doesn't have the accursed Richards sitting over his shoulder to bug him all the time. So left to his own devices, he actually goes on some very interesting adventures. He has a whole crew around him of supporting characters who flock to him as he is reborn in the very end of the 21st century. And all of that was, I'm not going to say it was completely taken apart by Warren Ellis, but he took it as the framework to go in a completely different direction. And this right here is special for another reason, because this is a fill-in issue. They had some regular fill-ins for Pat Broderick by Ernie Colon. And I want to say that Ernie Colon did a couple issues of the regular Doom 2099 book, and also a couple Doom features that ran in the 2099 Unlimited. So Ernie Colon was getting a fair amount of work drawing Dr. Doom for Marvel in the 90s, which is an interesting matchup. But it worked. It definitely worked, because a big part of like I say, the big part of the whole line, the whole 2099 line's identity, was that it had a little bit of cyberpunk in it. And for Doctor Doom, that meant that he spent a lot of time in cyberspace. So I think Ernie Colon came in to draw the cyberspace interludes, which worked because he could just draw a bunch of weird fantasy stuff without a lot of, reference to what was going on in the actual real world. And that was how 2099 played with cyberspace. There, like the opening scene here, it looks like Doom and his, I forget what this guy's name is. Duke Stratosphere, was it? No, not this guy. I can't remember his name. Looks like they're walking around Victorian London and fighting Jack the Ripper. And of course, Jack the Ripper isn't much of a match for Doctor Doom, whether he's cybernetic or not. So that's a quick battle. But you can see just about how the sky's the limit here. If it's just Doom walking through cyberspace and walking into different worlds as he travels. What is this? Raging Fighter. I don't remember this at all. I mean, I remember seeing the ads, but was this a... Oh yeah, this was a fighting game for the old school, two-color Game Boy. Interesting. So, yeah, here's Doctor Doom flying through cyberspace with his cyberpunk friend here. To rediscover my life, my memory, we travel to the outskirts of the city to encounter someone whose plight rivals my own. The thread through the first couple years of the Doom 2099 book was that Doom's memories were missing. His essence had been tampered with, so he spent much of the time trying to get back what was taken from him, to regain his lost memories, to figure out what had happened. And frankly, one of the things that didn't work quite so well from this run of the book was they kept coming back to this, like, oh, is he the real Doctor Doom or is he an imposter? And eventually, I think, one thing Warren Ellis did when he came on board was he said, well, that doesn't really matter anymore. We're just assuming this guy is Doctor Doom because his name's on the cover of the book and going with it from there. Because I still don't think it ended on anything conclusive in the big 25th issue that was supposedly resolving that plot line. So he runs into Frankenstein's monster here in cyberspace. Oh man, look at this color hold with this magenta. Look at this. And Ernie Colon's doing the story too. Lettering Rod Allenshaw. Coloring. Oh, it doesn't say who's doing coloring. I don't know if it's probably not Ernie Colon because I don't remember him doing his own colors, but we're not seeing who's coloring here. But this is a Joey Cavallari joint. He's the editor. He was actually he always wrote back to me when I wrote letters to the editor back in the day. So I have fond memories of his family of books. He put good people on his titles. Man. Look at that. I don't want to flip the page because this is such a nice looking comic book right here. Oh, man. I am a man out of time. Even in the world I came from, my manners, my courtliness, my worldview, my methods were decidedly Victorian. I mean, why are you getting to pieces of your life from maniacs and madmen, monsters and murderers? What have they got to do with you? See, because he's got this pack of people that he's sort of made, friends with in the 2099 universe who know him with a more benevolent cast to his actions. So, he's coming to Fleet Street. Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, Dr. Doom versus Sweeney Todd right here. Like, it's not even euphemism. It's Doom, what can you possibly want with Sweeney Todd the Demon Barber? I love these color holds they're using here. So imaginative. It is not Todd I seek, but you, Mrs. Lovett. Oh my goodness. This is fantastic. Keeper of this charnel house, you who assemble sustenance from the barbarous helpless victims, a trafficker in spare parts as it were, you symbolize the underworld I pass through, and I must speak to you before I can ascend. Man, I guess I would not have thought necessarily that inside, Doom's psyche was such a deep reverence for musical theater, but the proof is in the pudding. Thank you, Ernie Colon. Oh, man. Yeah, okay. You've already figured out. Doom 2099, number 9, from September of 1993. This is one that you need to track down, because this is a nice-looking book. You get to see Dr. Doom and Jacob Marley. Beware, Doom, I wear the chain I forged in life. Its weight is a sweet burden, however, it is nothing compared to the chain you have forged for yourself. Cease prattling like a child. You are dead as a doornail, Jacob Marley, and no use to anyone except myself. Oh, and he's having a showdown with Professor Moriarty in the cyberspace of the future. Here we go. So yeah, this Professor Moriarty is a sinister spirit inside cyberspace of the future. I am known among the demimonde as the Napoleon of crime. Professor Moriarty at your service. Are you indeed at my service? Negative, Doom. Data recovery is a two-way street. The only way this construct would cause Marley to bust up like that if he's a program written to run parallel to the path you're taking. See? Cyberspace lingo. My goodness, though. And I bought this. I didn't buy this issue at the grocery store, but I was buying Doom sometimes at the grocery store. They were just selling this to people, like, on the street. You can come in for $1.25 and buy one of the most gorgeous comic books you've ever seen in the grocery store. My God, we did not know how good we had it. Rookies, Rockies, Marlins, and more. 93 Fleer Ultra Baseball Series 2 with 83 Ultra Rookies. Ultra Rookies. Plus new faces in new places. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens. My goodness, just look at all this color. I wish they credited the colorist, because they really outdid themselves here. So, Jack the Ripper, he snuck back to do something sinister. Oh, here we go. Early Joe Madureira X-Men promo piece. This was right before he took over the regular X-Men book, because I want to say the last time, I don't think it was the last video, maybe the video before last when we looked at the was it X-Men 312 or something with Joe Madureira art. I looked afterwards. That was the first issue of X-Men Joe Madureira drew. He'd already done the Deadpool limited series, which I think came out in 93 this year. But this is one of his first times drawing the team as a whole with Scott Hanna on inks there. Nice piece. Yeah, they put a lot of money into these Pizza Hut promotions here. But yeah, so it's various cyberspace stuff happening. All right, Doom has really learned his way around my territory. I embrace the data that comprised your corporeality, adding it to my cyberverse self, so that truly, that which does not kill me, serves to make me stronger. Once more, this cyberspace domain has thwarted me. I nearly lost my sanity, my will to power. Now I must abandon the search for my memory. I am left with nothing except my rising anger. There you go. Ernie Colon has always been a graphic innovator, bringing a tremendous amount of intelligence to bear on the work he's written and drawn. So I'm especially pleased to show his stuff off in this issue. He's working on yet another Doom 2099 story, as well as a new character that will fit right in with Wire's milieu. Oh, that's this guy's name, Wire. More details when I can spill them. John, Pat, and John will be back next issue. Welcome to Wakanda 2099. Zandra meets Thandaza, Prince of the Fabled Land, as Doom tries to use that nation as a strategic stronghold. All that plus Fortune, Vox, Lei Fong, the Duke, Wire, and, get this, Valhalla 2099. Oh yeah, because they're building up to the Fall of the Hammer crossover. I think we looked at an issue of that a few episodes ago. Don't recognize any of these names. Oh my goodness, look at the subscription form. I know, you're used to hearing me just go on about it. The good thing about the subscription form is it had this nice piece of Gary Frank cheesecake art with Excalibur and Kurt holding two wieners there. Hey-yo! And this looks like a Continuity Studios Stridex ad. Continuity Studios, Neil Adams' outfit. They did a bunch of Stridex ads. They did some Butterfinger ads, too, a little bit before the Mortal Monday, September 13th. Oh, they made a really big deal out of this, the release of this one. All right, so there was a bullpen bulletins back here. And there was also one of these Entertainment This Month out of Gainesville, Florida. It's a nice promo piece. I don't remember where this promo piece saw print with the Asbats and Balent Catwoman. Maybe it was a trading card or something, because that's a nice piece of art. All right, so this is a bullpen bulletins with a Mark's remarks. America loves the little guys, the underdogs, the Davids who have the guts to go up against the Goliaths. And that goes not only for the individual little guys, but also for the corporate ones. Once upon a time, the Marvel Comics group was the little guy. Our books were even distributed by our major competitor, who limited the number of our titles they would carry, up until 1968. Then you, the readers, got a hold of our books, liked what you read, and Marvel began its steady climb to the top of the hill. By the end of the first decade of the Marvel Age of Comics, we had become the industry leader. The quality of our creative and editorial types have invested in every one of our titles has translated into higher and higher sales. This is 1993, man. Who are you, Mark? Who are you kidding there? Because look at this. This is one of these Hypeline boxes from 1993. This is Marvel's books in a week. Oh, man. So what are we celebrating here? We're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Avengers. They had a year's worth of foil covers. I think every third issue for that year in the Avengers had a foil cover. And one of them, maybe this was the one that had Deadpool in it. And that was a big deal just to get Deadpool for one issue of the Avengers. And he fought Black Knight. Man, they had the Frontier line, which lasted no amount of time whatsoever. It was one of their sort of half-assed attempts to put a toe in the same pool as Vertigo. If you run across any of Marvel's Frontier line, odd offshoot of Marvel UK, which was already, an odd offshoot of the Marvel Universe. Towards the end of the Conan's original run, we're up to 272. I think it petered out at 275. Dark Angel 14. And what was I saying? Deadpool number 2 of 4. This is the fight with him and the Juggernaut. Death 3. If it's got a number in the title, it must be British. Death's Head 2 and Die Cut number 2. See what we mean? Ecto Kid number 1, they're pushing the Barker verse. Fantastic Four Unlimited. So that was a $3 or $4 book. We've looked at an issue. It was the one with Herb Trimpe doing it during his Liefeld phase. Oh man, this is when they were pushing the Transformers in G.I. Joe, which, you know, Larry Hama wrote that run of comics with teeth gritted, because he did not write the original Transformers versus G.I. Joe. Very pointedly, he did not write that series. Neither did Bob Budiansky, for that matter. But they decided they were going to push the Transformers again in early 90s via the G.I. Joe. So Larry Hama was their guy. And this was the same month that Motormouth and Kill Power appeared in Incredible Hulk, which was a big deal for me because this was during the Gary Frank run of Hulk. And it was, Gary Frank's Motormouth and Kill Power interacting with Gary Frank's Hulk, written by Peter David. So that was probably like the big event for me in this week of comic books. Mad Dog, that was another, I want to say that was that book that they launched spinning off of that Bob Newhart sitcom. Look it up, kids. Savage Sword of Conan, again, that's on its last legs. What else we got here? Spike, another epic book from when they were just I think this was one of their epic books from when they were just pushing epic books out, trying to get some sort of space in the creator-owned territory that they had lost. I mean, they had epic in the 80s, and they tried to make a go of epic again, and keeping it going in the 90s, but it didn't survive the bankruptcy period. And since then, it's not like Marvel hasn't done creator-owned books. They had the Icon line, and they do creator-owned licensed books, like literary adaptations. But it's just not something that they have shown any interest in doing, really, since the Disney takeover. And it's a shame because, from a business point of view, even if it's a creator-owned book that they don't have the same ownership relation to, it's shelf space. And that was Jim Shooter's attitude in the 80s when he made, epic comics to begin with. Even if we don't own the copyright, it's shelf space with a Marvel logo. And it was competition against Image. But the books they were putting out from Epic in 92 and 93 were not competing with Image. They just weren't. I did not buy very many of them. So this is just looks like it's talking about an editorial retreat, bunch of wonky stuff. And a Rick Parker cartoon. All right, what do we got? All right, I got one for you. How about Wonder Woman 100 from the William Messner-Loebs and Mike Deodato run? I think we've looked at an issue from the Messner-Loebs and Deodato Jr. run. We looked at an issue of the William Messner-Loebs Flash a couple episodes ago. I think it was in the DC Pride special. So this was the last issue of Wonder Woman that William Messner-Loebs wrote. He wrote the book for a good few years, I think. And the last year was consumed with this storyline where Diana was... We saw one of the first issues of it before, and this is the conclusion of it. Basically, Diana loses a second tournament. She's stripped of her title of Wonder Woman. It's given to Artemis. And it turns out, what we're going to find out in this issue here, there's that Justice League Task Force again. What we find out in this issue is essentially the reason why all of this happened was that Hippolyta, she was playing a game, because she's always playing games with Wonder Woman, where essentially she had a prophecy that Wonder Woman was going to get killed. So she just decided, I'm just going to make someone else Wonder Woman for a year so that my daughter is saved. And as you can imagine, Diana didn't necessarily like that when she found it out. So, yeah, Mike Deodato, he's doing the art. That means he's inking himself. It's not his studios either. So, just look at that. Look at that. My goodness. John Costanza lettering. Patricia Mulvihill, colorist. Paul Kupperberg, editor. And that's definitely something that set Mike Deodato apart at the time, because this was 94, I want to say. Oh wait, no, late July 1995. So yeah, this is summer of 95. John Byrne is waiting in the wings. Is there an ad? Last page has a little thumbnail of the cover of Wonder Woman 101, beginning an exciting new era for the Amazon as John Byrne takes over the story and art. And I've spoken fondly of that run in the past. I quite like the John Byrne run of Wonder Woman. Not a Wonder Woman fan, keep that in mind, really. But, I've picked up a few runs over the years. I like the William Messner-Loebs run because I like William Messner-Loebs. And I like the John Byrne run because at the time, yes, I was still in the Byrne ward that late. I mean, I bought all of his Fourth World books, so, there was no hope for me whatsoever. But what set Deodato apart wasn't just that he could do the sexy babes with the rather large thighs, but look at these backgrounds. Look at this furniture and shadows. The man just straight up, he knew how to draw. Period. Oh, these same ads that we saw. We've been looking at a lot of comics from 95 lately, I guess. So this is Artemis, and she's still walking around with this goofy ponytail that goes, looks like it's 10 feet of hair, if it's an inch right there. So what, is she breaking into a prison or something here? She just didn't care. She was very violent. She was going to do anything she could to overthrow the patriarchy in man's world. Oh, and there's a monster she's got to fight. And I think that's what she's got to do here. Because you see this giant monster with horns, and he's got all these arrows sticking out of his back. A force field? I generate a force field that heals my friends? How else do you explain my recovery, Diana? These butchers don't have a clue. Spinal cord tissue just doesn't mend like that. And it's certainly no thanks to you, Prof. You are by any mark the most infuriating, least obedient, the worst patient anyone has ever had. So you see, we're spending a lot of time with this supporting cast, this human supporting cast, who I don't think will, I don't know for certain because I haven't read all of the Wonder Woman comics between now and 1995, but, when William Messner-Loebs left The Flash, his supporting cast that he developed was abandoned. Now, from what I understand, that was partly due to maybe miscommunication, misunderstanding. Some of the characters, I want to say, were going to appear somewhere else, and they just didn't. So he had, Wally West had a whole supporting cast that was thrown over when Mark Waid came in, who basically had to repopulate the book. And it was kind of similar with Wonder Woman. John Byrne, he didn't have any interest in using any of Messner-Loebs' supporting cast. But to be fair, he gave Wonder Woman a new supporting cast, including the Sandsmark family, Cassie Sandsmark, who ended up being a very, very popular addition to the Wonder Woman mythos because it was a Wonder Girl that was not dragged down by the negative associations of the Wonder Girl name. DC wants to have a Wonder Girl without having to actually deal with all of the baggage that goes along with it. Just the other day, I mentioned when I did, on the TikTok, we looked at not Teen Titans, Brave and the Bold 54, which was the first appearance of the Teen Titans. And I mentioned in passing, Wonder Girl joins the team in their second appearance, and it's, the beginning of an absolute sucking miasma of continuity that ends up, eating up decades and decades of stories. And, for my sins, as someone who likes to talk a lot about how I don't like the Teen Titans, I know the Wonder Girl saga, continuity-wise, pretty well. And it's awful. Maybe that's why I know it, because I'm attracted to the car crash aspect of it. So, yeah, some sort of magic teleportation. Yeah, and I'm just going to speak up here. I like Diana's jacket and bicycle shorts look. I did at the time because, she's doing her hair different. Anytime you're going to do one, and I've said in the past, anytime you're going to do Wonder Woman's hair different, I will check that out. I popped in when they cut her hair short in like 2002 or 2003. Loved that storyline. That was great. She had shoulder length this period. I thought that looked great. I know I'm not a very good Wonder Woman reader. Just do something different with her hair. Put her in a nice leather jacket, and I'm on board. And there's Cheetah and Cassandra Arnold. I don't know who Cassandra Arnold is off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I read the Messner-Loebs run of Wonder Woman, but wow, look at that. Yeah, I mean, this was DC's counter programming to all the bad girl stuff. Now the funny thing is, considering DC is DC, they actually did pretty well from the bad girl period, because they had, Jim Balin's Catwoman, who was one of the premier blue chip bad girl books. And it lasted until the end of the decade. And they even, sold Artemis that way, because this was 1995. Of course, they were selling Artemis as, Wonder Woman is a bad girl. So, yeah, this run of comics sold pretty well. And, Mike Deodato was, I think, a better artist than a lot of the folks who were doing other bad girl books. Now, of course, you can point out that his female anatomy has very little resemblance to anything you'd recognize as human physiology. But you can tell just from looking at how he draws a house, for instance, and how he understands perspective. He knows how to draw. He's drawing women that way because that's how he's being paid to draw, and that's how you were being paid to draw in 1995 if you were working for the mainstream. But yeah, so it's a big battle where they're both, getting the tar knocked out of them. And she gets an arrow flicked into her chest. I liked Artemis, and they just they couldn't do anything. They gave her, I think, one limited series after this run, and nothing came of it. John Byrne, I think she was hanging around in the background of the John Byrne run, but didn't have anything to do in it. Hippolyta actually ended up having a big role to play. There was you want to talk about another nightmarish retcon. John Byrne decided to send Hippolyta back in time and just retcon the original Justice Society and all of Wonder Woman's 1940s adventures as being Wonder Woman's mother traveling in time. And at the time, I thought it was great because it was fun. But then when they were done with it, they realized, well, that's probably not something we want to reference too often, or we'll be cited in a class action lawsuit. Just look at this. This is nice looking stuff here. There is evil in the world, Diana. You have to fight it. You have to make me proud of you. Oh, God. See, now, I am just not a Wonder Woman person at all. This whole Diana Trevor thing, she gave her life to save the Amazon so many years ago. In gratitude, their queen named her only daughter after her. One of these days, I just need to bite the bullet and sit down and read the George Perez Wonder Woman cover to cover, because it's very imposing. I've done little more than flip through it over the years, because I'm just not that into Wonder Woman. But also because Wonder Woman continuity, well, it's a little bit like Thor continuity. And it's a little pocket off in the middle of nowhere of the DC universe that is really deep, because it goes back decades and decades and decades. I just happen to be a little bit more interested in Thor and Asgard than I am, Wonder Woman and Themyscira. But look at this. The coloring is nice, too. Interesting use of pastels here. Who's coloring this again? Patricia Mulvihill. Well, there you go. This is, I think, still the last instant before the computers come in. So this is all the old-fashioned work. Look at this. Look at this. Now, if you're a Wonder Woman fan, this is probably not your favorite Wonder Woman run, but what can I say? So, yeah, Artemis is wearing some sort of gauntlet. Diana has to take it off to defeat the monster at the risk of, Artemis dying here. Whoomp. Brack. Brack again. 3 hams will thrill him. Yeah, and you can tell they were kind of this year's Wonder Woman annual, not by Byrne or Messner-Loebs. It's, who did they say in the back here? Kate Worley, Brent Anderson, and Ken Branch. So yeah, it's probably worth picking up. Simply, Brent Anderson, he doesn't draw bad comic books. I don't think I got this. It's not ringing a bell. Year 1 story, because all the annuals were year 1 in this year. It's a tale of Wonder Woman's year 1 as she encounters for the first time the question of mankind's faith in their deities and the matter of their respect for their past. In the deserts of Egypt and the jungles of South America, someone is robbing the artifacts of ancient tombs and cities. Well, there you go. The new Wonder Woman that they're just starting to leak now, the Absolute Wonder Woman or whatever, is supposed to have an archaeological, Tomb Raider kind of bent to it. So that is a long-standing angle in the character. You can't say it isn't. Man, look at this. No idea what's going on, but if you want to see 2 Wonder Womans with a lot of hair fighting a big old monster for a giant-size anniversary issue, here you go. And see, people were trepidatious. Although this person, Timothy S. Villa here, seems quite happy because they got John Byrne's name in all caps with asterisks between it. What else? Don't recognize any of those names. And we saw these ads the other day in something or other that we read. And the last video I put up with the new comics had an ad for McFarlane Toys. McFarlane Toys has been doing the DC line for years now, and they put an ad for a Batman Forever line that on the back of the book that was a straight homage to that, although it does not have a Chase Meridian figure. Although straight up, of these 5 characters, if I was going to pick one of them to have on an action figure on my shelf, I would buy a Nicole Kidman circa 1995 action figure, straight up. Whereas I don't think I want to remember. I don't want to commemorate Chris O'Donnell in any way, shape, or form. All right. Okay, here's a fun one. Monsters on the Prowl 27. Purchased at Gardner's Books, which is, I don't know if it's still around. This was 2.5 decades ago, but Gardner's Books is a giant used book warehouse in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And they had a pretty decent room of back issue boxes, as well as being a good used bookstore in general. I have no idea if it's still there. It's been 2.5 decades. And I haven't been back to Tulsa since I moved away, and I'm not planning on going anytime soon. But anyway, I paid all of $1.50 for this. I think I bought a pile of these at the time. So, see him grow before your eyes. Sserpo, the creature who crushed the world. He's still growing. Nothing can stop him. By tomorrow, his weight will crush the whole planet. Earth is doomed. Now, when they reprinted all of the 50s monster stuff in the late 60s or 70s, they would put new covers on it, or they do a paste-up job to change the old cover somehow. And it can be interesting to see sometimes the side-by-side, to see them, fixing Kirby's drawings, or if they've altered the story, because some of these stories, I don't think all of them, but some of them were altered, I guess to make them more readable or to tie them into something else. So there was some alteration done in the 70s incarnation of this art. This looks like the Kirby piece, but this little corner circle with Sserpo's face does not look like a Kirby drawing at all. So it looks like a bullpen paste up if ever there was one. So yeah, this is one of Jack Kirby's late 50s, very early 60s monster stuff, which I recommend highly. It's actually some of my favorite Jack Kirby, because I think the stories, not just the Kirby, but the Ditko monster stuff as well, and I've talked about this at length, so excuse me if you've heard this, spiel from me, but I think their monster stuff is underrated, because what you need to understand is that these aren't just like really silly stories that were designed to fit 100% as monster stories within the strictures of the comics code, meaning, it was a bunch of creature feature stuff. And straight up, this was more or less up Kirby's alley, because years later, when he would do monsters in, like his 70s books, he still had that basic horror aesthetic where everything's a little bit rounded, nothing you wouldn't show like maybe a precocious 9-year-old. He didn't get too much more into horror than like, Saturday afternoon creature feature type stuff. That was pretty much, his cruising altitude for suspense. So these, on top of that, you have the fact that these stories were all produced by men who were at personal and professional lows, profoundly low. Jack Kirby, he had just lost everything. He lost a company, he lost a business partner, assumedly, a friend, since he fell out. He wasn't working with Joe Simon anymore, and I think they'd only work again together a couple times in the 70s. So, he started his company in 1954. I think 1954, maybe the end of 1953. Me and dates. Is that a good time to be starting a comic book company, even if your name is Jack Kirby? No. Basically, there's no sugarcoating it. He had to come back to the last people on the planet he ever wanted to beg for work, and yet he had to. He had nothing. He had lost an immense amount. The whole industry had just been chopped down in clear-cutting whole segments of it. And Kirby's work certainly wasn't anywhere near what EC or any of the EC copycats were doing in terms of crime. But he did crime books. Now, most of his romance stuff wasn't necessarily something that was going to be lopped off by the code, but at the same time, he divested from the romance genre very early. So, he was basically back at Marvel, hat in hand, after they had screwed him over in the 60s, or not in the 60s, in the 40s. He had screwed him and Joe over Captain America, and he had to crawl back to this guy who he did not like from the very beginning. Back from the very beginning of their professional relationship, he thought Stan was a stooge. And of course, they ended up being associated together for the rest of their lives and in perpetuity. Two people who absolutely hated each other. So, on top of that, Stan Lee is in the middle of a huge midlife crisis at this point in his life. He is starting to understand that he is not a great writer in waiting. And he jokes about it in all of his later interviews. He's actually quite candid for the most part about his ambitions, in as much as he says he did not want to be a comic book writer. He's adamant about that. He wanted to be a great American novelist. He did not succeed in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, I do not believe that there is any surviving prose work of Stan Lee that has ever been published, other than his occasional text pieces that they used to run in comic books for the purposes of the post office. You had to have a text page, at least one text page, to qualify as magazine rates. And his first, Stan Lee's first ever printed work was a text story in Captain America #4, of all things. But he wasn't going to make it as a serious writer, and certainly the way he was going. And he kept trying to branch out into other types of humor magazines. He really wanted to make a go of photo humor books. We don't really have a name for them, even in this country. In Italy, they're fumetti, hugely popular. Marvel had nothing to do with the Italian market, I don't think, in the 1950s. So, there was no way for him to know that there was a market for photo funnies in Europe. But he wasn't going to access that market. It might as well have been on Mars. But if you go back and look at Stan Lee's 1950s, he just keeps trying to launch photo humor magazines, where it's just him putting up photos of celebrities or politicians or historical photos and putting funny words. He thought that was a surefire winner. That was his great idea, and it didn't take off in America. It just didn't. I think in Italy, one of the things that really pushed it was that those photo magazines often had lots of pictures of attractive actresses, which is an angle that he probably could have tried harder on, considering this was the 1950s and people were still buying lots of magazines with glossy pictures of starlets. And you go back and look at the actual photo humor stuff. Man, I'm talking about Stan Lee's photo humor magazines. I'm getting off into the weeds. I'm sorry, folks. But they're not that funny. They're not funny at all. And you just think, man, you staked a great deal of your professional, reputation on these magazines being a success, and they just didn't. So he was coming out of the 50s under his uncle's thumb. Martin Goodman controlled Stan Lee. Stan Lee knew it. And that's one reason why Stan Lee was a tyrant to everyone else, because Martin Goodman treated Stan Lee like he was 2 feet tall. Through the very end of their professional relationship, Martin Goodman was an absolutely abysmal manager. Just straight up. His underlings hated him actively. And yet, he kept the doors open at Marvel. You can't say he didn't. through dark days in the 1950s when he could very easily have cashed out. But it wasn't the comics that made the money. It was the men's magazines and the old school men's magazines, meaning they were filled with like rough fiction and very cheap pulp and with exploitation elements. That was Marvel's bread and butter as a publisher for years, like true romance, crime, confession books, which were popular in prose, and the Comics Code had nothing to do with them. Here's a Charles Atlas ad in the wild. So anyway, yeah, if you look at it like that, these are comic books being made by very depressed people. People who are just at their lowest ebb, and their job is to make really weird children's horror stories. And through that lens, I think they're absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And the Ditko ones, well, all the sob story I just told you about Lee and Kirby, Ditko almost died. He lost a year of his life fighting, I think, TB. And that would have impacted his health through the rest of his life. So everyone working on these stories was just high-paid job in drafting, approved for GIs and veterans. That was a big deal because if you were approved by the GI Bill, that was a big boon for some of these educational companies who did artistic correspondence courses. And you see in the history of comics and illustration, lots of people who got into the fields because of the GI Bill through some way or another. But yeah, I'm sure these are edited in some way, either for content or for space or something. Sometimes they mess around with the pages to fit an ad on there. But yeah, I just love. And here I thought we were home free. Anyway, yeah, I can't recommend these stories highly enough. They're really underread because they don't have continuing characters, and most of these monsters are kind of jokey. There is still a tongue definitely in cheek through the whole thing, but at the same time, they have a definite tone, an emotional mood, and it's shared, like by the first year of the Fantastic Four, which is actually kind of a dark book in its very earliest incarnations. And it's dark because it's coming out of this very dark and uncertain period in the lives of these creators who really come together. Two people who, Kirby did not like Lee from the beginning. Lee probably thought Kirby was great because, and they just, these are so dark and gloomy. I don't think that gets necessarily a lot of attention, just how sort of emotionally raw they are in a way, considering they're just these really silly little, not even to the level of, a well-written TV show like The Outer Limits, just a complete, a skeletal outline at its best of something like you would see on The Outer Limits, or, maybe one of the more schlockier Twilight Zones. Sometimes the Twilight Zones had some monsters in it. So they're advertising Foom. Man, what I wouldn't give for a Foom membership kit. I do have a Wham membership kit, minus the membership card. It would have been to another name, but it still stings that I don't have it, because it was a nice membership kit, and I still have the kit, but the card. I kept the card in my wallet, and then I lost my wallet. Day after Christmas, carried around a bunch of Christmas money. In the comic book store, no less. So, I think I got my wallet pilfered at that comic book store, but what are you going to do? You live you learn. I don't have my Wham membership card anymore, but that didn't entitle you to anything. If you don't know Wham, it's Wild Agents of Marvel. It was around for an even shorter amount of time than FOOM, which was itself not around for very long at all, because Marvel tried 3 successive fan clubs in the 60s, the 70s, and the very early 90s, and they figured out it's just way too much trouble and no one wants to do it every single time. So Fantastic Four was up to 140, The Return of Annihilus, plus more of the startling secret of Franklin B. Richards. Oh, they were probably just getting around to really showing off his powers at this point. Spider-Man 126. Remember the high-stepping kangaroo? Well, Spidey'd better. So yeah, Spider-Man, he just went through the ringer. Thor 217. Thor is beginning a very flat period of his history. Pretty much as soon as Kirby leaves, up through... I'd argue that the Roy Thomas run has some moments, but there's really not a lot going on in Thor until you get to Walter Simonson. Hulk, to be fair, Hulk did have some very good art. He had a lot of classic primetime Herb Trimpe. I mean, hey, the first appearance of Wolverine, if you've never read it, go back. Absolutely representative, excellent mid-70s Herb Trimpe. He's got Kirby, but I'd also argue, he's got some John Severin in him as well. And definitely a sense of design that paid attention to Jim Steranko. So not a witless artist at all. And for decades, Herb Trimpe did have a reputation as a fairly witless artist. And you go back and look and see, oh, well, he had obvious influences that he pulled from. He could draw better when he wanted to, which is kind of damning in itself. Hero for Hire 15, I think they're in that first prime run of Billy Graham, Luke Cage stories that are absolutely gorgeous. If you've never seen any Billy Graham, either for the Black Panther or Iron Fist. Iron Fist wasn't around yet. It was Power Man at the time. For Power Man or Black Panther, his work is just absolutely phenomenal. He was remarkably influential. Didn't seem that people used to talk about him, but people talk about him now. He definitely was influential in his day. Tomb of Dracula 14, so that series is just, it hasn't even begun to hit its stride yet. Because I've said before, Tomb of Dracula is one of Marvel's very best books of all their history. Put it up against, vintage Lee and Kirby Fantastic Four. Put it up against Michael Golden's run of the Nam. Tomb of Dracula, right there. Front and center among Marvel's best runs. And they've been running like hell from that version of Dracula ever since. I despair of ever seeing the real guy, the actual Marvel Dracula, ever again. Oh man, I can't even think of a vituperative enough insult for what I think of Marvel's current Dracula character. I spit on it. It's just so witless, to use that word again, compared to this absolutely sublime run of comic books. Captain America and the Falcon 167. I think we're still in the Englehart run. Kirby joins up in, I think, a year when he returns to the company. A year and change, maybe. Daredevil 105. Conan the Barbarian 32. Submariner 67. Iron Man 64. So you've got the first run of the Man-Thing stories in Fear 18. Worlds Unknown. Still doing adaptations of classic sci-fi stuff. They got a Frederick Brown adaptation in this one. That wouldn't last for very long. And I want to say, maybe the run for this is the one that closes out with an adaptation of one of the Sinbad movies. Ghost Rider, just getting going. Issue 3. Marvel Team Up 15. Oh, Spidey meets Ghost Rider. So they're in the middle of their big first push for Ghost Rider, because the horror heroes are having their moment. I mean, the early to mid-70s is the only period you can ever imagine the Man-Thing carrying a book. And yet he carried a book for a good few years. You know, if you add up various, I think he had a solo series, and then there was a couple anthologies. But if you add it all up, there was a pile of Man-Thing stories made in the 1970s, and that's pretty much the only time in the history of the American comics industry, I think, you could ever have floated a Man-Thing. They've never even... How long has it been since they tried with even a Man-Thing limited series? Oh, wait. I actually think, of all people, R.L. Stine wrote some Man-Thing a little while ago, because he is of the generation who would remember this original run of stories. And since I know he at least has some affection and understanding of comic books, he probably was very familiar with those when he wanted to write the character. So yeah, extraordinarily influential, but man, Man-Thing isn't a character that you see carrying their own monthly book again anytime soon. I mean, I say that, you know, it could happen tomorrow with the right pitch, but also it's not going to happen tomorrow. Western Team Up, they're still in the era of still publishing their Western books. They're doing the occasional new Western story, but the, you know, selling new, oh, well, there you go, a newie. This is the period where most, like I'd say 85, 90, 95% of their Western books were reprints, because they were still selling, but they were only selling enough to repackage older stories. And that, I think Sergeant Fury might have been on reprints as well, and X-Men was on reprints by now as well. And that was just the way the market worked back then. You could still make money reselling the same lines, and that's why there's so many reprint books in the classic era of Marvel, because there was no expectation that there would be any shelf life for those things, so that meant you could bring them back after just a few years and, you know, take up a good chunk of the newsstand with, you know, books that you've already done. Cull is up to 11. You know, Cull is like, when Conan is really healthy, you can support a Cull book, because Cull is just like, if what's the right metaphor to use here? Because I started off the show talking about how Doom 2099 was decaf Doctor Doom. Essentially, where were we here? Cull is the espresso version of Conan. It's denser, it's drier, it's much more political. It's basically, when you can float Conan and he's doing really well, the older Conan readers will pick up Cull. But Cull is also not a character who is probably going to be holding his own title anytime soon. I noticed that the current Conan people haven't made any go with Cull yet. And although maybe that's going to be in the magazine, because they just did a 3-part Solomon Kane serial in the first 3 issues of the new Savage Sword of Conan. So maybe they'll be doing Cull in the Savage Sword of Conan. But, like I say, drier, denser, more political. You actually have to pay attention to what people are saying in the word balloons. It's a little bit more like Hal Foster than the regular Conan. Because Robert E. Howard is its own thing, and you don't necessarily think about Conan being in conversation with something like Prince Valiant. But Cole definitely has a little bit of that Prince Valiant in his DNA, the way he's been done in comics, because they also got a lot of John Severin to draw Cole. I'm just babbling about Cole. All right, well, that's, I think this is going to be another episode for the heads, because I didn't pander in it. That's just life. Sometimes you forget to pander to, the actual people who are going to want to click on that little icon because they see an X or a bat. That's the world we live in, folks. Anyway, if you like this show, if you like any of my shows, any of this, wonderful pageantry we have on this channel, give a thought to looking at the Patreon. I got years, decades worth of my old writing compiled for you to download there if you'd like. And if you appreciate anything I do, that's how you show your appreciation. I do daily comic book reviews on TikTok and Instagram. This summer, we're looking at Savage Tales, the Larry Hama edited Marvel magazine from the 1980s, an absolutely fantastic magazine, pretty much from start to finish, although it starts to maybe get a little bit wobbly in the second half. Really enjoying the hell out of having an excuse to sit down and read each issue of that, more or less cover to cover. Just a real treat, and I'm just excited to be able to share it with people. That's what I enjoy. That is what gets me out of bed in the morning, is to talk about comic books with other people. I enjoy it immensely, and I hope you enjoy sitting here with me. What else do I need to mention? Oh yeah, if you like me talking about comic books, I do have a new show on this channel. You probably see it. There's probably a link to it on the screen right under this video right now. I'm looking at new comics. It's called Hey Tegan, What's in the Bag, where I spend a little bit less time talking about the comics that I buy. Anyway, new comics that I buy, that is. Have a wonderful day. It's rough out there, man. Things are interesting. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people you love. Be kind to animals and small children. All that good stuff. And please, 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 have a good day.